Unmuted.
Hi, and welcome to The Secret to Choosing a CMS. Thank you for joining us. We're glad you could all be here today. We're just about to begin, so right now we're going to go through a little bit of an intro and address some technical topics, and then we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Matt Zellner. I'm from Adage Technologies, and I'll be your host for the event. So we'd like to let you know if you are experiencing any technical difficulties with this session, you can dial 1-866-962-6492 for the GoToWebinar technical support. At this point, all participants are in listen-only mode. Please note that as an attendee, you are part of a larger audience today. However, due to privacy concerns, the attendee list will not be displayed. The presenters will be holding a Q&A session at the end of today's presentation, but please feel free to ask questions online at any time, and the presenters will answer as many as they can during our later Q&A session and respond to others via email or phone. To ask a question, simply go to the questions box located in the right-hand corner of your screen as part of the control console, type in your question, and click the send button. Keep in mind that the questions will be sent to the presenters as well as to myself. And with that said, I'd like to move on to introducing Adage Technologies, your host for today. Adage Technologies is a web development firm with experience designing and developing CMS-based websites and mobile applications, as well as e-commerce solutions. And we specialize in developing these not only to engage your customers, but your community as well. And we work with a variety of customers that have very integral communities. And we hope that that's true for you as well. We're based in Chicago with customers throughout the United States, and we're branching into Europe. We've got a few there. And we've been working on CMS, or content management system solutions, since 2001. And that includes a huge variety of different systems. And we, of course, have our favorites, but a wide variety that we've worked on at one point or another. Now I'd like to introduce our presenters. All of our presenters are from Adage. They're actually part of one of our specialized CMS teams. And this is starting with Caitlin Grogan, our project manager. Caitlin came to Adage with a background in content management and marketing, and today she serves as both a project manager and as Adage's director of client services. She focuses on finding creative solutions that bring technology and marketing together to solve our clients' toughest business problems. We also have Calvin Belden, who's a developer here at Adage. Calvin has worked on a few of our largest e-commerce solutions, including the Royal Danish Theatre, our first multilingual client, truly multilingual e-commerce experience, the American Academy of Pediatrics, where Calvin has extensive experience integrating with In-Rivers PIM. Outside of e-commerce, Calvin has worked with Silverpop, where he helps support Salesforce and Engage integration. And we also have Derek Bauer. Derek Bauer is a senior developer here at Adage. And Derek has worked on a variety of our largest e-commerce projects, everything from the ones we mentioned for Cal to some that are even larger than that, including AAP, RDT, and our other multilingual sites. All right. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin to get us started. Caitlin is going to run through an introduction and the agenda, and then begin the presentation. All right. Why don't you take it away, Caitlin?
Thanks, Matt. All right, thank you everyone for joining us. As Matt mentioned, I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we'll be covering today. So we've broken down our considerations into 4 factors of selecting a content management system. We'll be going through all of these in just a minute, and Derek and Calvin will be helping you with that. But first, let's take a step back and talk about what we're calling CMS 101. This is really the basics of content management system. We just want to be sure we're really all on the same page when we say content management system. What are we talking about? So we have a definition here for you, but at its most basic level, a content management system is a software system that provides the framework and the tools needed to create and manage content for users who do not have a technical background. There are literally hundreds of content management systems available and in active development, so making sense of all of your options can be very difficult. So to start sifting through your options, a good place to start is understanding 3 basic categories of content management systems. There's 3 categories, and first we have commercial, open source, And finally, we have custom content management systems. So let's take a look at our commercial content management systems first. A commercial CMS is a licensed content management system with dedicated and responsive teams whose sole focus is to build and enhance their content management system. The cost of that license pays for access to what we might call a brain trust for your CMS. This means good things for you and your team. You'll have dedicated and responsive support from that CMS team, regular and stable upgrades of the latest features that they've been developing. In addition to that, most of these content management systems host vibrant developer and user communities that really encourage knowledge sharing and cross-pollination to kind of get a sense of what the latest and greatest things are that other teams are doing to really leverage these content management systems. Finally, a key aspect of the commercial content management system is that they manage partner programs. What this means for you is that if you engage a development partner to build or to support your website, but eventually you want to disengage from them in some way, your CMS provider can actually help you identify a new development partner to support your website. Now, the trade-off to these benefits, of course, is the cost of the license for starters. You'll also have a little less flexibility, meaning that some new features may be developed more slowly. That ensures stability. But in some cases, you may want a little bit more of a dynamic experience. You also might be influenced toward a hosting solution that might not work for you. In short, commercial content management systems have a natural incentive to sell to their customers. Our second category is open source. So open source CMSs, they're unlicensed, free content management systems where a team of developers has created source code that is open to the public to build off of. In other words, you might engage your in-house development staff, or you might hire a development partner to build a customized content management system from this source code. You might also, as is like with the case of an open source CMS like WordPress, for example, you might pay for pre-built templates that some developer has already created. Now, the benefit of this structure is that there is a large and supportive community of developers who are building off of this source code. New features are evolving more quickly. You have immediate access to them. Now, the downside here is that there's no assurances that this code is always going to be stable. And another big consideration here for similar reasons is security, where a commercial CMS is more likely to have a dedicated team working to ensure solid website security standards. There are less assurances and accountability on this point in the open source world. Finally, though there is a large community of developers, dedicated support from the content management system itself may come at an additional cost with paid support packages. So definitely something to consider in terms of your support options. Finally, we have custom content management systems. These are often proprietary CMSs created either by an in-house development team, so perhaps your own developers, or by a development partner with a CMS that they've designed specifically and will recommend for your implementation. A strong word of caution with these custom CMSs, they're going to be extremely costly and mean, if developed in-house, a big investment on your technology resources. On the other hand, if you hire a development vendor or partner to build your website with their proprietary code, your website is going to be more dependent on your development partner, and it'll be more difficult to take your website elsewhere. So definitely something to consider. So we'll quickly just summarize here our commercial CMS, keeping in mind that license cost is going to mean that you have a more consistent and stable experience. You're going to have access to regular upgrades that are more stable. You have that dedicated support, that idea of the brain trust that you can tap into, as well as your user community, where you have users or developers like you and your team to bounce ideas off of. And again, you're not tied to a single development partner. You have some flexibility there. Again, some of the bad points here, there is, of course, the licensing costs, as well as a little less flexibility. You're going to be tied to that platform, and you may be influenced toward hosting solutions that might not work for you. Quickly summarizing those pros and cons of the open source CMS. Again, that open code means the vibrant community of developers. It is free. There's going to be a little bit more flexibility to bleeding edge technologies. And again, that large community is definitely attractive to some teams. Now, the bad here again is irregular product updates. Those updates might cause breaking changes if, say, a plugin that you've leveraged on your content management system is dependent on an older version of your CMS and you upgrade. Again, keep in mind security. You want to be sure you're choosing something that is a very secure system. You want, obviously, your content to be in a secure environment. And that lack of formal support can be difficult or come at a cost. And finally, features are not always going to be implemented with a consistent user experience or UX. So it's good to get a sense of how consistent that open source CMS is. And finally, the custom content management system, really consider whether this is the right option for you given the investment, both in terms of your resources and in terms of your budget. Don't forget about the security, again, a big concern. Keep in mind that if you are choosing a partner to work with on their proprietary CMS, you might get a little bit tied in there. And then finally, do you really need to invent the wheel? In many cases, there may be a commercial or an open source CMS out there that meets your business's use case. So before you build something fresh from start, consider whether there is an option out there for you that will work. Okay, so that's CMS 101. We've covered the basics. So let's jump into our first consideration, experience. Now, this really means, what is the experience like for managing your content? How easy is it to edit and update your content across your website? We're going to break down the editing experience into a few key components. An intuitive editing interface speaks for itself. Asset management, how are we managing media on the website? Templates and components, how it all comes together. And finally, content workflow, how is that coming live to the website? So looking first at an intuitive editing interface, let's take a look at one of our examples. So here we have an interface, and this is Episerver. This is actually Adage's website. This is a blog entry. And what's nice here, what I like seeing in this particular screenshot, is I can very clearly see what I can edit. I have that title, it has a blue box around it, so I know that I can edit that. I also see that there's a WYSIWYG, or a what you see is what you get editor down below, where I can apply styles, I can make things bold, I can insert an image. Very intuitive. On the left-hand column here, I'm seeing which page I'm looking at. It's underneath the blog. I see the tree structure of the website. I very clearly understand contextually what I'm editing and where in the website I am. Very useful. And then over on the right column, I have what is my media management for managing any sort of images that might appear on this page. In this case, we don't have any images on this page, so there aren't any images coming up, but we'll jump into that in just a second. Now, this is what it looks like when I'm editing. This is what it looks like once it's live on the web. So you can see that it really does look quite similar. Of course, those editing panes kind of disappear, but I am getting that sense of what is this content going to look like when it's on the website. A little bit of a different type of editing interface is the form-based editor. So anyone who's worked with WordPress before is going to be familiar with this kind of form look. Now, this may work for your needs. However, if you want to get that sense of contextually of what the content looks like, we want to keep that in mind when you're evaluating various content management systems. Another consideration, especially if you're making a site that's responsive, is to consider whether you're going to get a preview of what your content will look like on a user's mobile or tablet device. Some content management systems will offer this preview. Sometimes they call it a viewport. And that allows you to see that content on an iPhone, an iPad, Android. It really will allow you to make good choices about content. So you know that what you're putting on the page is going to appear upon load and not, say, somewhere further down on the page where a user is going to have to scroll. Okay, so that's our editing interface. Moving on to asset management, we have a few questions here that we want to ask when we're considering asset management. Since assets are some of the most fluid elements on your website, meaning that you may have a featured image or video that you're changing in and out over time, you're going to want to be able to manage these assets and media very easily. So first, how are your files stored? How easy is it to access them? How many clicks does it take you to see a preview of your selected asset? Here we can see in this screenshot, I'm getting a quick little snapshot, a thumbnail of what image I'm looking at without having to click into just a file name and not know what that thumbnail might be. What is that file structure like? Another kind of great feature here that we're seeing is that there's a search functionality in this media management system that allows me to search for any sort of terms in the file name or keyword tagging I've done, so I know that searching is going to be easy to find my files. I also am looking for a file structure that doesn't demand a one-to-one relationship between the file structure of the website and the assets itself. In other words, I can have an image that is housed in one folder in my asset management that can be used in any file or any place on the website without having to be tied one-to-one. Another big consideration often kind of comes up when considering a content management system is a digital asset management system, or a DAM. So it's important to remember that just because you have digital assets, that doesn't mean that you do need a DAM. Depending on how robust your needs are for managing assets, you may find that a CMS will get the job done. So consider your requirements for how you need to manage your assets. I would line them out if I were you. For example, do I need to edit, resize, and crop my images? Do I need version control of my images? Do I need some sort of collaboration or commenting system? Because you can then use those questions when evaluating CMSs to see if they're going to meet those needs, and you may not need a DAM. How easy is it to manage metadata and thumbnails? So we all know that proper SEO practices can make or break your website, so be sure to ask whether a CMS is going to support easy tagging for managing things like your image alt tags. Very important, of course. And then finally, some content management systems do offer that built-in tool that will allow you to edit your assets. This can be incredibly important, particularly if you have a team of marketers, maybe even yourself, who does not have access to, say, Adobe Photoshop. But you have an image, you want to get it live on the website. If you can just crop, resize, rotate that image in the CMS, it's going to be a lot easier to get that live on the site as opposed to needing to go through, say, a designer or someone on your creative staff who's going to have access to Photoshop. So I mentioned asking how many clicks it takes to see what image or asset you're accessing. So here you can see that I'm seeing a preview of my image in that right column down below that I've dragged onto the page. So I know exactly what I'm getting when I pull that image onto the page, all without needing to click in a level to see any kind of preview. I know that I see that checklist, that little checklist clipboard, and that's the image I'm selecting. All right, so once we have our editorial content and our media content, we're ready to put it all together. Now, there are two schools of thoughts when it comes to putting together pages. One is a little bit more static, which we're calling templates, and one is a little bit more dynamic, which we're calling components, that allows you a little bit more of a drag and drop building block feel to putting a page together. So in this case, we're looking at some templates. If you're looking at any kind of content management system, there's likely to be some kind of templating. Something to consider that I really like when looking at content management systems is this ability to see a small preview of what template I'm selecting. You may wind up with several templates on your website, and you really want to be able to very clearly see an intuitive sense of which template I'm selecting when creating a new page on the website. Now, this is a shot of Kentico. This is similar to that component idea where they call their components web parts. So I'm selecting here a web part of editable text. And when I select this, I'm going to build that small web part. And then I'm going to pull it onto the page. So this is, again, Kentico. You can see here each one of these small little blocks is essentially coming together to build a single web page. More and more content management systems do offer this ability, so definitely something to consider because often it's much easier to manage these small bits of content that can be reused on multiple pages as opposed to being tied with that static single page experience. So finally, we've put it all together. It's time to put this content live onto the website. So how do we control the flow of content? So for larger marketing departments, automating the publishing process for content can really save you time. And many CMSs do come with an out-of-box basic flow for publishing content. And what I mean by this is that they may have two roles, for example, an editor role and a publisher role, that allow editors to create content, draft it up, and submit that for publishing to the web without having access to put that directly live on the internet. This is, of course, really helpful. Now, some content management systems do offer somewhat more complex workflow options. Also, your development partner may be able to help you create a more complex workflow, and that makes it easier for content to be submitted, edited, reviewed, and approved by, say, different parties as opposed to just one group of publishers. Another great feature that some content management systems offer are projects and campaigns. So, for example, a great use case here would be if you have a marketing initiative that you've been working on for weeks and weeks. It's going live at 2 p.m. on Thursday. There's going to be a big announcement about it. Everything is geared up to go out at 2 p.m. You can actually, in your content management system, batch together all of this content that you've created related to that particular marketing initiative and schedule it to go live at 2 p.m. on Thursday. This means that you're not sitting at your desk chained at 1:58, 1:59, waiting to press publish on a bunch of different content pieces. You are actually just maybe even at that press conference. You don't need to worry about scheduling and being there doing that manually. Now, at a most basic level, in addition to workflow, there's the idea of permissions. Now, this is going to be very useful in cases where you want to give a user very limited access to a certain part of the website. Great use case here might be that you want to give your recruiter access to the careers portion of the website, but you don't necessarily want that recruiter to be able to edit your homepage. So you can open up permissions to them just to edit, say, a couple pages, right down to like the file and page level to ensure that the right content is getting edited by the right people. Okay, so we've covered the editing interface. Now, once you've selected some sort of content management system where you feel like you've got it narrowed down, the editing experience is going to be what you need it to be, another consideration would be marketing tools. Now, you may have a larger suite of marketing tools doing email marketing, a CRM, outside of your content management system, and we'll be talking a little bit about how you might integrate with those. But to start things out, what if you don't have all those tools ready and available? Or what if you're just simply interested to know in what marketing tools a content management system might offer you out of box? Let's take a look at some of the functionalities that you might be able to leverage with the right content management system. So to start things out, SEO, we know content is paramount when it comes to search engine results and your website performing well. Google's algorithm continues to shift more and more toward valuing good content. But that said, good SEO practices in terms of proper tagging, metadata remains extremely important. So you want to be sure your content management system is leveraging tools that make it very easy for your website to be indexed by search engines. This might mean how easy is it to update your title tag? I want to update the description or keywords. Where is that found on your website, and how easy is it to update page to page? Now, once you've got your metadata in place, you'll want to see how your pages are performing. A CMS that can offer you a way to tie into your analytics is going to be really great because it's going to allow you to see in context how your content is performing real time, which is just great. Now, finally, if you have tied into your analytics, you've got the good metadata in place, you now want to know what you can do to optimize your SEO. So there are SEO optimization tools that can tie into content management systems, and really understanding how you can optimize and perform better in the context of editing will be very helpful. Now, here we have an example of Umbraco, which is an open source content management system. And here we have a use case where a plugin has been used to find inbound link errors. Again, another consideration when it comes to search engine optimization. So again, regardless of whether you're looking at which category of content management systems, we know that there are different ways that you can manage your SEO with either plugins or out-of-box options. A second marketing tool you might be interested in using would be A/B testing. So a little basics on A/B testing. We have this graphic here to demonstrate. We have a variation A, where I've leveraged some content on this particular element of the page, and variation B, where we've put different content in place. And we're running A/B testing to see which content actually leads to more conversions. And I'm seeing here a better conversion rate with variation A. So a lot of content management systems are starting to offer this more and more, but it's good to ask what exactly you can test. So in some cases, a content management system may only allow you to switch out text, maybe just headings, call to action text, maybe images. In other cases, it may offer more robust A/B testing where you can actually change the entire layout of the page. So keep that in mind when you're considering A/B testing and what's going to be most useful for you, because not all content management systems will have the same kind of A/B or multivariate testing available. Finally, personalization. What is personalization? So personalization is basically a way to first group your website users and identify the types of users you would like to target content to, and then create targeted content so your users are actually getting a very adaptive and responsive web experience to who they are. Now, personalization in a content management system is essentially just setting a group of rules that offers that specific content. So when you're asking yourself what you need to do with personalization, it's good to consider what types of facets you might be personalizing off of. So we have a couple examples here of what you might be personalizing off of. This can lead from anything to what their referring URL is, to time of day, which is a great one depending on if it's nighttime or maybe it's the middle of the business day, what their search keyword was. And again, more content management systems are offering this kind of marketing tool. So it's worth noting that you'll also have an option, say if you're tying in with a CRM like Salesforce, you could pull custom data on your users from their login to your website that will actually personalize content based on who they are more specifically. So this takes it from beyond that out-of-box option where we're targeting just based on, say, a geographic location, and instead targeting very specifically based on a user's preferences that they've identified in a profile, or their behavior perhaps with products they have purchased or performances they have attended. So we know very specifically what kind of personal data is going to be important to them. So now that we've covered two of our factors, I'm going to hand things off to Calvin, and he's going to expand a little bit on this idea of integrating with other systems that you may already be using.
Thank you, Caitlin. So another key factor to consider is how well your CMS will integrate with your other business systems. So to deliver the most engaging content to your audience, you will likely need to pull information from systems outside of your CMS. Although you should expect your CMS to come with some additional tools and features, like the marketing tools that Caitlin just talked about, you will almost certainly expect either more advanced functionality or the ability to integrate with other software products. Certain CMSs are going to play nicer with external systems, and we'll see that there are two different approaches as to how CMSs accomplish this. So CMSs, as far as connecting to other systems, typically fall into two paradigms. The first of which is called the best of breed or the ecosystem model. In the best of breed model, the CMS is built with more open integration in mind. So what exactly does this mean? This means that instead of the CMS vendor offering you their own implementations of other software products, they instead provide plugins that can be used to interface with external systems. Typically, open source CMS options fall into this category. A few examples are Episerver, Umbraco, and Drupal. On the other hand, we have the suite model. So in the suite model, the CMS is part of a suite of programs that are all offered and owned by the CMS vendor, and these can include marketing automation, email marketing, and CRM systems. Out of box, the suite model is going to boast higher integration quality because the same CMS vendor owns the software products. The downside is that this limits your choices when considering other tools. It's not impossible to integrate with a different product if you're using a suite model CMS, it just might be more difficult. A few examples are Adobe, Sitecore, and Kentico. So here we have a diagram of this term, the Digital Experience Hub. And so this is a pretty hot term right now used by best-of-breed CMSs like Episerver and Sitefinity. The idea is that the CMS serves as the intersection of your other business tools. For example, Episerver provides numerous plugins that allow you to interface with products like InRiver's PIM or Silverpop's Engage platform. Here we see a diagram of Adobe's web experience offering. So Adobe is really the prototype of the suite model. When you think of suites, think Adobe. In addition to a CMS, Adobe provides their own implementations of various tools. With little to no additional effort, these systems will be able to communicate. The Adobe web experience pulls together their publishing suite, their marketing cloud, and their CMS. Whether you choose the best of breed or the suite model, you may need to develop a custom connector for a third-party system that is not currently supported by your CMS or by your CMS prospects. Before you decide to do this, ensure there isn't already a tool that you can use. And the reason is that building connectors can be really expensive. And the reason they're expensive is that upgrades to either the CMS or the third-party tool that you're trying to integrate with can cause your connector to break. This is going to cause you to pay for ongoing maintenance and support throughout the lifetime of your website. So the first thing you want to do is to check with your in-house developers or your partner to see if there isn't already a plugin or some other tool that you can use to integrate with this system. If after you do that, you don't find any existing tools that can help you, look for evidence that this has been done before. An excellent place to look are blogs and technical articles that the CMS vendor has written or other developers have written for that particular CMS. So I just want to talk about another CMS integration, which is eCommerce. So if you're looking to develop an e-commerce site, you'll likely want a CMS with a built-in e-commerce platform. So many CMSs have e-commerce platforms. You're going to want to choose one that fits the complexity of your online store. You don't want to end up paying for features that you're not going to use, and you don't want to end up with a CMS e-commerce platform that's too simple for the complexity of your online store. So for example, Kentico Commerce might be okay for a small retailer, but you would probably want to go with an Episerver for larger implementations. So there are a few considerations. First, is all of your business going to go through the online store, or is this just a small fraction? Do you have tens of SKUs or thousands of SKUs? Do you have several complex business rules that affect how users can purchase products? Are you working with a $10,000 marketing budget or a $10 million budget? And finally, how detailed is your product information? Do you just have a few properties like price and name, or do you have several like description, highlights, author, artist, etc.? So an example of one of our clients, who I would say is more on the complicated spectrum of e-commerce implementations, is the Royal Danish Theatre. So they're one of our theater clients, and they have lots of performance data and a fairly complicated checkout path due to subscriptions. Additionally, they are a multilingual website because they're targeting an international audience. Because of all these things, they had to go with a slightly more complicated e-commerce platform. To get an idea of your own needs, consult with your partner who will have completed a variety of e-commerce implementations. So that wraps up connecting to your systems. I'm going to pass the wheel over to Derek, who's going to talk about our fourth and final factor.
Thanks, Calvin. So the fourth factor is the implementation process and technical considerations. I know we have a variety of people from different backgrounds on the webinar today. So I just want to give everybody a heads up. that in this section, some technical terms might be thrown around, but nothing too crazy. I know some of you may be asking, if this is going to get technical, why should I care about this section? Well, I've got 3 very important reasons why. The first one is timeline. Everybody wants to know when their new CMS will be up and running, and it is the implementation process that will determine that timeline. Second, and probably the most important item, is cost. You are going to want to get halfway through the development process and find out you can't afford some of those key features you were planning on. And then finally, maintenance. Once the CMS is up and running, you're going to want to keep it up and running. And inevitably, you're going to come up with some new features you would like to add. So let's go ahead and get into this a little bit deeper. The first technical consideration you should make when selecting a CMS is to take a look at your internal staff. Many organizations choose to use an outside development firm like Adage to handle their CMS implementation. But many companies also have the internal staff to either handle the whole implementation process or to at least take over the maintenance of the application once the initial development has been completed. If your company does intend on having your in-house developers work on the CMS in some fashion, then you're probably going to want to make sure you pick a CMS that matches their skill sets. In general, CMSs are going to fall into one of 2 technical categories. The first of those is the Microsoft stack, which is going to be ASP.NET, MVC.NET, C#, SQL Server, and IIS. And the second of those categories is LAMP, which is going to would mean technologies like PHP, Java, Linux, Apache, and MySQL. So if your developers fall into one of these 2 categories, that means those hundreds of different CMSs that Caitlin had mentioned, you're going to be able to cut that list in half because you're going to be just focusing on the CMS that are going to match up with your internal development team. Much like your developer resources, your existing infrastructure will also play a role into the CMS you select. Do you already have existing servers and databases that you are maintaining? If so, you're probably going to want to stick with the same technology for your CMS. Otherwise, you will likely need to get new servers for the CMS, and perhaps the bigger issue is that your IT team will have to maintain a new set of servers. This means a different set of upgrades, security patches, and configurations that IT will need to become familiar with. If your current IT team is not familiar with the new environment, that would either mean new training for them or expanding your IT department and hiring additional resources. The same thing goes for any existing applications. Maintenance will just be easier in the long run if you're able to stick to a similar technology. Unless, of course, the technologies that you currently have in place have become outdated, then you'll want to upgrade here and start using a newer technology. So once you've taken inventory of your internal resources, the next question to ask yourself is, where are you going to be hosting the CMS? You have 2 main options here, premise and cloud. With premise hosting, you're going to be hosting either internally or at a hosting center that you pick on your own, which you'll be in charge of setting up the servers and maintaining. So what that's going to include is likely a one-time licensing cost from the CMS vendor. You'll have control over your own hardware, which of course also means that you're going to have to involve IT to set everything up. It can be costly to scale up since that will involve adding more hardware. You will also have higher upfront costs. You have to purchase the equipment and also purchase the software that you'll be running on those servers. And additionally, ongoing maintenance costs. Typically every 5 years, you're going to have to replace your servers. Plus, you're also going to have to maintain those servers with software updates and backups. Cloud, on the other hand, which has become very trendy as of late, is going to take a lot of those maintenance and upfront costs away from you. But what that means is that you're going to have a monthly licensing fee as opposed to that one-time cost. But with that, you're not going to need to worry about the hardware. That's all going to be taken care of for you. Setup will also be quick, but migration freedom could potentially be an issue here. Also, cloud hosting is going to be very scalable. If traffic to your site increases, you're going to be able to add additional hardware and bandwidth as needed. Also, theoretically, cloud hosting will typically result in an overall lower cost over the course of your website. The next thing you're going to want to look at is how complex is your CMS project. CMS implementations can run a pretty large range as far as complexity, scope, and cost go. At one end of the range, we have our free WordPress sites, where you can go online, select a template, and within a couple clicks, you can have your site up and running. At the other end, you have very large CMS implementations that could cost millions of dollars. The implementation for these types of CMSs would likely utilize a number of those out-of-the-box features, but also lots and lots of custom features. This will likely include things like eCommerce and several third-party integrations. Odds are your implementation is going to fall somewhere between these two extremes. The goal here is to determine where in the range you fall and what CMS or CMSs match up well to the complexity of your actual project. Once you have an understanding of how big your project is, that's going to help you determine what size of a CMS you're going to need and what that's going to cost you. Remember that free does not always mean it won't be costly. So in this graph, we have two examples. The orange line is a free CMS. It may be a little hard to see, but the free CMS starts out at $0 cost. And we also have an enterprise level CMS, which is going to start off at around $30,000 cost in this graph. For the purpose of this graph, I'm going to assume that costs are going to average about 30% more on the free CMS versus the enterprise level CMS. This is development costs that we're looking at. So depending on your exact requirements and the requirements for your implementation, this percentage may be more or less. Two main reasons you're going to see these differences would be that one, the enterprise CMS is going to have a lot more features. So if you're doing that free CMS, you're actually going to have to develop some of those features from scratch as opposed to taking advantage of what is already in the CMS. And then the second big reason is that the free CMS is likely going to be more difficult to customize and develop against compared to that enterprise level CMS. So those customizations that you are going to have to make are going to cost you more than that free CMS. So with that 30% more development costs that we're kind of averaging out here, it's around that $120,000 mark where that free CMS actually starts to become more expensive than having utilized an enterprise CMS from the get-go. So you're going to really want to take a look at your project and what features you need out of the box, the size of your project, and really figure out which CMS is going to match up to you and see what's going to be the most cost-effective long-term. Because after the initial development, you're still going to have that increased 30% development cost on the free CMS versus the enterprise CMS. So any maintenance is going to be more expensive as well. So we've gone through the four main factors. So let's go ahead and kind of review some of the key points that we've gone over. First item we talked about was the editing experience. The key thing to look for here is going to be an easy-to-use editing interface that is designed for our increasingly omni-channel world. Next, we took a look at marketing tools. For this section, you're going to want to make sure that your CMS has quality marketing tools that can be easily integrated out of the box, or that there are additional marketing tools that you're going to be able to integrate with easily. Along with this, you're going to be looking for some of those custom out-of-the-box features like A/B testing and personalization. Next, we took a look at integrations. The key here is you're going to want to pick a platform that matches your business structure. If you're already using a third-party system, you're going to want to make sure that you're going to be able to integrate that system into your CMS. And then finally, we took a look at the implementation process. The key here is to pick a CMS that your team is going to be able to work with and that will be cost effective in the long term.
All right, thanks, Derek. At this point, we're going to go ahead and move into the Q&A portion of our presentation. So I'd like to again remind you that we have a few minutes to answer questions, and if you haven't done so already, you can type your questions into the box in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen as part of the control console, and our presenters will hopefully get to it in just a few moments. If they aren't able to, and I know we've got a few good questions, we'll make sure to answer the question after the webinar is over via email. And you can see that on the screen you have my name and email. Feel free to reach out, and I can channel your question to either myself or to the appropriate presenter. And feel free also to email me if you have any question about any of the examples we've used. We used a variety of CMS systems for our examples, including AppServer, Kentico, Umbraco, WordPress, and Drupal. So if you have any questions about those, feel free to reach out, and I can let you know which one was which if there was some confusion. But for right now, let's move into our Q&A section with some of the questions we have. All right, we have this I think would be a good one for you, Caitlin. Why don't you start with, we need a new CMS now, but I expect my content is going to change significantly in some marketing initiatives we have planned next year. What should I be looking for if my company needs to make a CMS decision now? Want to take that one, Caitlin?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So what I would recommend is looking for a content management system that's going to allow some flexibility down the road. So let's say that if you are really truly just talking about content, which it sounds like that's what this question's about, not so much about, say, a redesign that would really be changing that look and feel and more of the layout of your site. If we're really just talking about content, I would recommend you're looking at a content management system that's going to allow particularly flexibility in your information architecture. So for your CMS, that's really going to mean your navigation. I would be looking for something where you can even perhaps like drag and drop your pages. That's going to make it much easier to move your content around. I would also be sure to ask about whether there's any sort of internal management for handling redirects if you need to point your pages in any different direction. Another kind of cool, more advanced feature that we didn't have time to jump into today is the ability to essentially share content across pages. So perhaps two pages are using the same content, but only being pulled from one page. That would be another great thing to ask about, just because you may find yourself in that kind of interim period as you're changing your content up on the site. You would be able to manage that a little bit better. So I think the short story here is looking for something that offers flexibility, and those are some of the points I might specifically ask about to find a CMS that's going to give you that.
Great. Thanks, Caitlin. We have another question. I think this one would be great for you, Cal. Why don't you take a look at, we've spent a large amount of money already on a marketing suite. Does this mean we are better suited for best-of-breed model?
So the answer, as it almost always is that it depends. So if you can find a CMS which probably will be a best of breed and it already has an existing plugin, then that may sway your decision. All right. Well, that said, choosing a best of breed may work well for your marketing suite, but you should also consider any additional features or products that might be more easily included using a suite. And finally, just because you choose a suite, we mentioned this earlier, you're not automatically precluded from integrating with third-party systems. It just might be more difficult. So, like I said, it definitely depends, and it depends on the specifics of your company and the CMSs that you're looking at. So this would be a great opportunity to talk to your partner to see what their recommendations are.
Great, thanks, Cal. And then, Derek, I've passed one more question over to you. Hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at that one, which is how can I tell if a CMS is going to be easy to develop against? Want to take that one, Derek?
Great question. Unfortunately, there's no easy answer to this. The best way is probably to talk with a development partner that has experience with multiple CMSs and is going to give you an honest evaluation of the pros and cons of each. The problem with that is, of course, if you're going through the process of selecting a CMS, you're likely going through the process of selecting a development partner. And the reality is that anybody is going to say that the CMS that they have chosen is easy to develop against. So here at Adage, kind of when we evaluate new CMSs, I think there are several approaches that we take to that. The first is we're going to start off looking at reviews online and seeing what people have actually developed against that platform are saying about it. The second, once we've kind of narrowed down our list from those reviews and gone on forums to read what people are saying, we'll probably pick the top few of those, and we'll actually download a demo or version of the CMS, and we'll actually try and test it out and try and develop against it a little bit and do a little bit of customization in there and actually see how difficult it is to actually get set up, get up and running, and do some minor development tasks against it. Unfortunately, there's still no surefire what way. Once you get farther into the development process, there may be features that you didn't initially test out that may be more difficult to do with a new CMS than you would have imagined. But really the best way is to test them out a little bit, read reviews, and talk with somebody who has experience in the different CMSs.
Great, thanks, Derek. I think we have probably one more question here. I think this is a good one. We want to add Spanish language to our site in the next year or two. What questions should we be asking to plan for that, as in to plan for adding Spanish language to our site in the next year or two? Caitlin, I think that's an editing interface question. Why don't you take that one?
Yeah, sure, definitely. So that's a really good question, and more and more CMSs are just offering that kind of out of box. So most modern CMSs will, if you simply ask, can I have Spanish language or is there multilingual support, the answer is going to be yes. But I think the important follow-up question to ask there is, how intuitive is it to edit that other language? And so that's really going to differ from not just CMS to CMS, but also from implementation to implementation. So I would definitely ask, any CMS you're considering, try to get a sense of what that might look like, and also keep in mind that this is something your development partner is going to be able to help you with to plan for the best possible multilingual experience in editing that content.
Great answer, Caitlin. Thank you. I think that's just about all the time and questions we can address right now. I know that there were a few others, but would like to go ahead and wrap up. So if you haven't gotten a response to your question, you can expect one via email shortly. We'll have one of our team members reach out to you with that answer, and so we'll make sure all of those get addressed. Additionally, if you have more questions that come up later, my email address is right here, mzellner@adagetechnologies.com. Feel free to reach out after the presentation is over with additional questions, or as I mentioned, questions about the CMSs that we highlighted in our presentation. Going forward, all attendees will receive a copy of this presentation via email, as well as the answers to their questions. I'd like to also encourage people, again, to email additional questions, and I will make sure, of course, if those are directed specifically to a presenter, that they are sent that way. Again, thanks to our presenters, Caitlin, Calvin, and Derek for their presentations today, and thank you everyone for attending the webinar. We'll be reaching out to you soon with information about the questions and slides. Thanks for joining us and have a great day.